Welcome to Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we build products in public. Each week, we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we share our struggles, our wins, and everything in between. I'm Benedict, and I'm feeling calm.
I'm Benedicte. Today is March 1st. This is episode 129, and I am also feeling calm.
Which is a surprise to me, even was just talking about this earlier. For some reason, I'm calm. I have a feeling I shouldn't be. And I wasn't for most of last week and the last couple of days. But at this very moment, I'm quite calm.
Yeah, and I went on a vacation in the, I want to say mountains, but it was the woods outside of Oslo last week. And I got that like really serene, winter wonderland kind of feeling. And it's stayed with me. And as we spoke a little bit asynchronously a couple of days ago, it was the right week to be somewhere where you couldn't really watch the news all the time because there was only solar panels. So our cell phones kind of ran out of batteries pretty fast, and we just had to enjoy nature, which had a very calming effect on me. And I'm still there and like working. Should I work? I don't know. It's like, what do I actually? I'm a little bit like, what do I actually do? Like, what I tried to look over my notes of what I've been doing the week before the vacation, and yeah, it says that I did quite a bit on POW. It was fun. I'm not really sure what I did, but obviously I was pleased.
Well, that's at least something, right?
That is something. So, what have you been up to?
Yeah, I don't know. Times are weird. As I said, like right now I'm feeling calm. I just came back from a walk outside in the sun, through the woods. That was kind of nice, and I feel like that kind of calmed me down a little bit. Because the last couple of days, man, anxiety has been my anxious has been my primary feeling for the most part. With all that's happening in Ukraine and the war, it's just super terrible. And I find myself doom scrolling on Twitter and the news more than I probably should. And like every morning when I wake up, I basically dread looking at my phone and like reading any posts about anything, because I'm always like, what horrible thing happened this night? And as stupid as it sounds, but some mornings I was relieved that it didn't get that much worse, but it's already worse, like super worse. So don't want to say what could possibly be worse than this, but I mean there are still endless possibilities of how this could be worse. So
yeah, let's not speculate. This is, I guess, not our wheelhouse. We're pretty good at algorithms and coding, but geopolitical interests are not. It's not my specialty. And as I said, since I've been quite a lot on Twitter. I felt like after Christmas, I think it was a little bit, a lot of stuff happens in our family during Christmas in January. So I kind of got a little attached to my phone. So I think it was really good that, as I said last week, I didn't have that access because it kind of weaned me off it a little bit last week. So, and then coming back into town, I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep having like less phone time. And as we said, this is the correct time to have less phone time.
Yeah, totally.
Because there's little you can do, right? At least doom scrolling doesn't help your mental health or anyone else, really.
Very true. It's still hard to stay away from it, unfortunately, for me at least right now. And honestly, it started Tuesday last week. I made a mistake and opened my phone before going to bed and read that they're basically planning to send troops into like the eastern regions of Ukraine, and that got my mind spinning for the entire night because I was like just not sure what that's going to mean. And yeah, I don't know. It was a horrible night. I didn't sleep. I maybe slept like 3 hours or so, so I was wasted the Tuesday after that.
And that's when we had the early morning interview, and I had not done what you had
Yes.
done, but I hadn't slept either. So both of us are like trying to ask Marie questions, and it's not coming out of our mouths the way we intended to every now and then, because it was like,
Yes.
okay, my brain is just not functioning today. But yeah. Have you done anything work-wise though? We've kind of established that I have done
nothing.
feels nothing. Well, I did go skiing. I played with my child. I, hung out with family. So, like, I've done things, but it hasn't moved the needle
all fun
on
things.
any of my
Yeah.
business metrics, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, after worrying on Tuesday, we did get some work done, but like most of last week was basically trying to figure out how to deal with all of this, because as it stands now, we are directly affected by sanctions that are happening. And we had to figure out how to deal with that and what that might look like. So,
you want to elaborate on that for the people who don't know?
I will elaborate a little bit on that. So, as some of you might know, and some maybe don't, but my co-founder is from Russia and living in Russia. And with the current sanctions and basically kicking Russia out of the SWIFT messaging system, we're not able to pay her anymore. So, yeah, we knew this was a possibility. So last week we basically paid her 2 months in advance to at least delay that, like figuring out a proper solution for this until then. But I'm still not entirely sure how we'll manage to do that. And we talked about a couple of possibilities, including like her basically pausing work on userlist for a while. But who knows? I mean, for the next 2 months we're good, but it's tricky. And I'm not saying that sanctions are wrong or anything. It's just like something we have to deal with, just because that's the nature of things right now. So last week we didn't get a lot of other stuff done. I tried to get into deeper work to get like basically distract myself from stuff, but it only happened so often. But the week before that was quite productive. For example, we finally published our new terms of services and privacy policy and data processing agreements that are required for GDPR. We had stuff like this in place, but it wasn't quite up to date. It didn't have like the standard contractual clauses and stuff like that in there, and some customers were starting to ask for it. So I think it was in September, October of last year, we started basically getting in touch with a lawyer and like getting them to review everything, adjust it and change it. And we had a couple of calls, and holy shit, this was expensive. Like we spent a little over 10K on this, like just getting the paperwork into a good shape again, and up to speed. And yes, maybe the lawyer was quite expensive as well. Maybe we could have done it cheaper. But I mean, that's how it is. That's how it turned out. And the sad thing is, I don't know if you followed the news on that, but basically the week where we wrapped up the work with the lawyers, there was a new ruling in Austria that basically said like all of the stuff we're doing right now is bullshit anyways.
Yep.
So now we have the new legal paperwork in place, but there's still this open question of what now? Like it will probably need an overhaul sometime soon again. So it kind of feels like the money went down the toilet.
Because you're storing data in the US, is that why? Or
yeah, and we're also a US company, and servers are run on Heroku, which is a US company, which then uses Amazon, which is a US company. So no matter how you spin it, it's always a US company involved in it. And I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but the way I interpret the new ruling, it sounds like whenever a US company is involved in any of it, like somehow like having access to personal data in of European customers, it's basically not okay. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I kind of gathered as well. And I think for like, as long as you're like a very small company, you can like feel like they're not going to come out after you, even though they could, of course. But since the fines are very much based on your earnings, I think we'll see more of these larger kind of cases coming forth where they can actually get paid for the work they've done in trying to investigate. But I think it's going to be interesting to see, because I'm definitely kind of pro the thought behind it. Like, I understand why we don't want to store too much data, in the US. But it's going to be really hard to run internet businesses if that is everything. Like, there needs, and I think a lot of these lawmakers, they don't understand technology as well, maybe, as they should. Because one thing is like having a Google script in there that like tracks everything, and it's like added to the kind of Google machinery that has tons of data on you from like a million other places as well. But having, just some kind of statistics, or saving user data and letting people know that we're actually saving this in another country. Do you still want to be a customer? Like, those are different. Those are kind of different use cases, because it's a little bit about like how sneaky is it and how much is it. But I mean, I'm definitely in this wheelhouse with POW, because I encrypt everything, but it's stored on Amazon servers. But it's all encrypted except for the user data, because even in Norway, you're not allowed to delete billing information. Like, if I've ever billed someone, I need to have that information about the invoice for, I guess, 10 years or something, for accounting purposes. So I can't just delete that, and it's going to be weird. Like, when you use Stripe is also data in the US. So how are you supposed to bill people if you can't save data on them, or at least that data? Well, so it gets tricky really fast. But I'm also happy that there's more people are starting to ask questions, and people are getting more interested and more concerned about the amount of data being stored on them.
Totally. Like, overall, I agree with most of what the regulations are trying to do. It's just like in the detail, like in how to execute on that and how to do it, it gets tricky. And I think, there might be still the thing of like, as long as you have consent from everyone that the data is transferred into the US, I guess it's fine. But how do you, like, we as user list, we can only hope that all of our customers are being open with their customers about the fact that they are then sending data to user list, which then is using storing data in the US. So it gets a little bit tricky. And while I'm not exactly worried about that we are breaking the law, it's still tricky for, like, if you look at the entire chain of responsibilities from a consumer somewhere not knowingly opting into something, and then the entire chain of whoever is touching that data until it's on a hard drive somewhere in some data center. So anyways, at least I'm glad we finally managed to wrap up the process and have new documents in place and let our customers know. And the couple of customers who requested like that we update that stuff are happy, and hopefully new customers are happy as well. So glad we finally finished that project, because it took a long while and wasn't like, of all the projects in user list that we have to do, like legal paperwork is usually the least fun thing.
Do you feel like it's below or above accounting?
Below accounting for sure. Like
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm enjoying accounting, but at least accounting gives you numbers and logic, and like it follows very strict rules that where there's not a lot of interpretation. Whereas like the privacy policy stuff, like every sentence you read, you're like, yeah, this could like literally mean like 5 different things. And what about this edge case and that edge case? And that's not really covered, is it? And I guess that's also why our bill with the lawyers was that much, because we spent a couple of hours with them, like going back and forth and like clarifying, like, is it supposed to be this way? Is it supposed to be that way? What are you actually doing? And what does that actually mean? How does this apply and stuff like that? So yeah, it's definitely worse than accounting, at least in my books.
Yeah. But I feel like a lot of these things that I've learned with regulatory things over the years is that what you need is that you need kind of the paper trail. You need to say, we have interpreted it this way, and kind of give your case and document like you have done now. And then some people can come along and say, well, we disagree. And then there's a case. But like, as long as you have really documented, and also that you can trace all the information you store, like you on your side kind of have control, then it's less likely that you will get into trouble, instead of, if somebody came and were like, well, so where is it stored? And it's like, oh, we don't really know. There might be some server somewhere. Like, well, but going through everything, now you could say, well, it's stored, in this way. We have kind of the paper trail. We've documented it. And at least you're like in good faith. You're trying to do the best thing. And I think that is helpful. Or I think that's what they are asking for. Like, they're not asking for everyone to interpret it the same way, because that's not how it, because you can't make that abstract syntax tree out of these ruling or these laws, because it's, as you said, there's like 5 different ways you couldn't code the parser if you wanted to.
For sure. Anyways,
I don't know if that was helpful, but at least it's the same thing with counting. I feel like as long as you kind of have you've actually made an opinion about why you did it the way you did, and you can like argue for that case, somebody can disagree and it might be changed, but they're not going to fine you as long as you kind of have a reason for what you're doing, kind of.
As long as they have a reason, and the reason isn't malicious intent.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and the reason isn't ripping people off.
I had a very good reason to transfer that money into that account.
I needed it.
I really wanted to save taxes.
I just really needed some more money. So, yeah, that's not what I meant, but. Anyway, this is also not in my wheelhouse, actually, of expertise, but things you need to learn when you've been in business on your own for like 10 years, I think. Yeah, 10 years. No, 11 years. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's the least fun part. Well, maybe not the least fun part, but glad that project is over. The other thing that happened kind of unplanned is Jane is still doing her podcast and the Better Than Imperfect podcast. And on one of those shows, she had, I think, the product manager or something like that of Veep Analytics on the show. And they started talking behind the scenes or after the recording a little bit about integrations and stuff like that. And it turned out Veep's working on a new integration feature or a new way to integrate with them. And kind of out of the blue, unplanned, and not that we expected it, we started a call with them about integrating Heap and user list. And over the last week, I built an integration that allows you to basically synchronize segments that you have in Heap into user list. So, for example, maybe let me talk a little bit about Heap itself. Heap is a pretty powerful analytics tool, it's kind of feels like it's somewhat, in a way, it's like Google Analytics, but like more focused on actual product metrics. So it does track page views and stuff like that, but you can also send in custom events in there and track feature usage, and then work with non-anonymized data, so you get like a good idea of like who that customer is and what they did, and you can create segments similar to those you can create in user list, but maybe in some ways a little bit more advanced, because they only do like the reporting and analytics part of it. And with that new feature, it allows you to basically create like super advanced segments in heap and then synchronize them into user lists. So what we built last week was, now have a concept of external segments, and people can leave and join those segments in the external tool, and that will be synchronized into user lists. And you can still run all of the automations based on that and view them in the UI. It's just like a segment in user list that we already had, but powered by an external tool. And it was kind of an aha moment that we had in that call with Heap. And it made so much sense because, for example, Mixpanel, which is like a direct competitor of Heap, they have a similar concept, but in the past I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. But it suddenly made sense, and we're probably just going to do a similar thing with Mixpanel sometime soon as well. Anyways, long story short, we built a Heap integration. It's going to be hopefully be featured when they launch this new integration type in April or so. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it's exciting, and it was a nice small self-contained project that's adding a totally new perspective to user list that we hadn't on our radar so far. So it's kind of cool.
You're becoming the integration specialist, or like integration hero. User list can integrate with almost anything now. You just keep on adding integrations.
At least incoming stuff is pretty easy right now, and that was one of the goals, for at least one of my goals. And maybe even Jane. Yeah, I think we kind of deliberately agreed on integrations is like one of the key things we want to work on this year. Mm-hmm. Also because it's a good marketing channel, because we build relationships with all those integration partners, and hopefully like we get backlinks, co-marketing opportunities, and stuff like that. And I'm excited that we're finally in a place where we can bang out more of those integrations quicker. And I'm going as far as like actually writing generators in Rails and in Ember, so we can like relatively quickly just generate new integrations by doing like Rails generate integration heap, and we'll add the necessary files and configuration options right away. So it's kind of cool. That's that part. For this week, I'm, after 4.5 years of working on user list, I'm finally working on adding an authorization layer to user list. So right now, of course, it's authenticated. Not everyone can access everything, but we don't have a concept of user roles or even different features on different plans or anything like that. So for the first time, I'm trying to figure out like how do we restrict access to certain parts of the application based on either a user role or a plan they are on. And it sounds simple, but it's kind of tricky and easy to make a big steaming pile of spaghetti. And I'm trying to be super.
You're not in the mood for spaghetti?
I'm always in the mood for spaghetti, but not inside my code base. So this week I'm trying to figure out a good way to start locking things down but still make it flexible enough to allow like different use cases and stuff like that, and have that play with all the parts in the application, because sure, like limiting API requests is one thing, but depending on like features that are enabled on your account or restrictions, we also might want to do like stuff in our background processing or not do stuff in the background processing. So the thing we're trying to build right now is kind of touching everything and has to work with everything, and just we have to be able to make sense of everything at all times. So it's going to be tricky, and I shied away from this project for the longest time.
What is
But I feel like
happening now that makes you what has happened that made this a priority?
that sounds like something bad happened, but that's not the case, luckily.
I know it could be anything. I'm sorry if it was. I was trying to formulate it, and there is like, yeah, when you have this like sales call or like business call, you're supposed to like ask that in like a very like nice but straightforward manner. But I couldn't remember how it's formulated. It's like what has made this a priority? Like what? Yeah.
I touched on this a little bit in a previous episode, I think late last year, is we are looking at introducing different pricing tiers with different features enabled on them, and that kind of requires us to lock down certain parts of the application. And looking into the future, we also might want to, like, as I said, like have different user roles, because right now you log into it, you can invite more people into your account, but they have full access, and you don't necessarily want that for all of your employees. So that plays into it. And the third thing that's like a little bit further into the future is with all the integrations we are building, at some point, I think we should have a public API to allow other people to build integrations with user list. And for that, we kind of want to have like more fine-grained control over scopes that people can access. So while an integration might have access to a certain part of the API, you don't necessarily want them to get all your invoices or billing data or stuff like that. So in the future, this might play into this as well. So yeah, sounds like it's a good time to tackle this now. And I have to be really careful to, well, for one, not break anything, but also to not get carried away by making this too fancy. So I constantly keep reminding myself
that could never happen.
To solve one problem right now and not try to anticipate all the future problems and future use cases for this. So yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge. But yeah, that's basically what's going on, or what has been going on. And yeah, let's see what this week brings in terms of like building this authorization monster.
I think it was around authentication I was working when I was working on POW the week before the vacation. Like trying to look at my note again, what I was doing. Yeah, there was something I was doing, some organizationing behind the scenes so that we can finally, at some point in the near future before the summer, add some features. Because I felt like, a lot of the foundation wasn't really there. So I could work with it as it was, but it's like when you get annoyed every time you're going to do something, it's like, well, I can hack around that. I can hack around that. I can hack around that. And then you're like, well, now I'm spending so much time trying to get this feature going because I have to kind of hack around everything. So I think I did this like also last time I was working on POW. I started on this kind of refactoring and somehow got stuck. But but before the vacation, it seemed like it was working. And if I remember correctly, I wrote down some notes and I did some very tiny changes. So I didn't go for like a big thing. I did like lots of tiny refactors and actually deployed those. So that was a good strategy because sometimes, as you said, one can go a little overboard because it's like, well, I'll just do a little bit over there as well. It's like, it's similar. And then
Yeah,
you don't remember
it's
what you were doing, and then yeah.
it's so easy to, like, I think that's one of the things I'm struggling with the most when working on stuff is like breaking things down into smaller steps and um not trying to do all of the things at once, because usually I have a good idea where I want to go and what I want to have, and usually the first attempt is usually me trying to solve all of the things in one go, and that usually results in a big mess, and I don't have a clear understanding of like how things should look like. And time and time again, stopping what I'm doing and then like just trying to do like the simplest slices one by one, and feeling okay that like the first slice is probably shitty and maybe not even doing the right thing, but it's a little bit closer. And then in the next iteration, get it a little bit closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And then at some point, maybe renaming everything and just like moving stuff around. But in the past, and I am sure I will do in the future, is like I'm trying to do all at once and like rename everything and move stuff around and also add new functionality and change old functionality, and that always ends in a mess. And I'm not sure why I'm not learning that. Why I'm
Well,
always trying to do it all at once.
I've started trying to be a little bit more mindful of where I am in the process, because I think you need those kind of crazy, and if we then call them explorations instead of refactoring, where you kind of go everywhere because you're trying to figure out, how am I going to solve this? And you don't have enough information on how to make them small, because you're not really sure where
Yeah.
you want to go, and you're not like, you don't have, and you need that kind of exploration time, kind of like a research phase. When people write books or papers, like they have this phase where they just like, go everywhere, and then they kind of take all of that information, and then they create an outline, and then they start kind of chipping away on their project. But what I think is hard as a developer is that we do often, at least for me, like you do both of those types of work in the same tool. Like we do that exploration in our code editor, and having Google, I guess, up so we can like Google things. And then when we're going to do our tiny slices, it's also in the code editor. While if you're a writer, like a lot of the research will probably be reading and like gathering things, which is like physically different. And then you sit down to write. While we do both, it's harder to be mindful that like I am now in the exploration phase and it's okay. And I am now in like doing a paragraph mode.
Yeah.
And when I am mindful of that, it works really well, because then I'm like, okay, I'm all over the place and on a branch, and then I just like scrap it, or I call it like
Yeah.
commit something like whip, and then just call it WIP.
Yes.
And then I have it there if I need to go back to it. And then I go into my issue tracker or in GitHub, and I like create tiny little issues, and then I can like do those, and I can do them separately. But sometimes when I'm not mindful, it kind of just everything gets muddled, and then I get discouraged, and then here we are 8 months later.
Yes.
So,
yes.
but I think, yeah, I have to remind myself that as well, that like, okay, it's okay, but like now I'm switching gears, and at some point you need to switch gears, instead of feeling like it's wasteful, because at least I do it almost every time. So it's something there I need to get the overview, but maybe time box it, or maybe know that you're in that phase and not let that drag on into like the proper implementation phase, I guess. So I think I'd have to go back on my commit messages after this call and see what I actually did that week, and like remember and make a little plan for my next phase of actual implementation. But it felt really good. I remember now, it felt really good getting back kind of into it. And I think I'm going to get a lot of use out of you during the next year if we keep on doing this, because with POW, which is the Privacy First Menstrual Cycle Journal, for those who don't know that, I have thought a lot about having kind of, tech interested users, kind of like power users, And everything is encrypted, of course, but then letting the user kind of decide themselves on the privacy level, and also letting the user, so let's say instead of so data coming out of, because I'm thinking more about integration. That's what I was thinking about you. Because if we can get the data, I need the data out of the app and kind of into my calendar so that I can plan around my cycle. And I need to see that in my calendar because that's where I have everything else. But instead of then just sending all the data out, like I want to be able to kind of like add some reminders myself, or like name certain times of the cycle myself, so that it's kind of secret. Like it's not thing that Google, or I could make it explicit, but I could also make it secret. It could be an emoji, I don't know. But then getting it out of the application in kind of this like semi-secret way that is very much in the power of the user. And then I thought about your Zapier integration. I was like, well, maybe I should just like start with Zapier, because we want to do messaging. Like I want to get, or I want to be able to send other people, or my partner, I guess, a message every now and then, depending on like like things I set up in my app. And instead of then starting to make kind of email myself, or I could do that with UCS or SMS, I could maybe integrate with Zapier and then have Zapier send an emoji to Ola at certain, like on day 15 every cycle or something like that. So I think I'm going to be able to use some of your expertise in the in the future. And I think that could be like for me, it could be like a really fun technical challenge, but I also think it could differentiate us, because all of the other apps are very consumer oriented. Of course, this is also consumer oriented, but they are very much like in their app. Like you have to go into their app in the kind of app store version of the app, and they share the data with everyone, but not with the person who actually needs the freaking data. So if we could make it like a cool way of getting the data out, and then actually use something like Zapier and use something like create a little like calendar feed, then people could be very creative about how they use it, instead of me guessing how they want to use it. Like I could have more tech savvy, or no coders, but like tech savvy people set up their own little bots or their own little systems with Zapier. So I think that could be super interesting, and also a differentiator from a lot of the other our competitors, I guess. Yeah. So if somebody, yes, I'm very, and it was actually so back to, because we talked a little bit about that on the show last time, like being a developer for too many years is sometimes a hindrance, because I was like, well, we can't share this data. I mean, it's private. And we were talking about how to do notification. It was actually Ula, my partner and now junior developer, who was like, well, can't they just go in and say, like, I want to send a message every day 14, and then they can write in the message. It doesn't have to come from the data, like the private data. And I was like, yes, they could. But like in my mind, I was like, well, we don't have this data. And he was like, well, I can do that. Like I can go, like you can let the user do that. And I was like, yes, you could. Obviously you could, but that's not how you would do it. So that was a good addition, to talk to somebody who's not too much into kind of like how we usually do things with tech or with code. Anyway, that's like, I am getting excited. Next week, Pau is 2 years old.
All right. Yes.
Yes.
Is it on Tuesday?
I think it is. On our next recording day. So maybe
nice.
by then I should
celebrate.
have. Yeah, well, maybe I should have some plans and goals and stuff by next Tuesday, so that I know what I'm supposed to work on the next year. I feel like things are a little up in the air right now. That's probably why I feel like I haven't done anything, because I have done stuff. It's just like the balls are up in the air. They're not organized and like neatly sorted in my head. Yeah. So
makes sense.
But I think that's it for me, other than being vacation. Oh, I'm going to vacation more. I'm going to be traveling. Well, I'm not going to vacation, maybe. I'm going to London to visit my dad and also folks I know from the interwebs. So if you are in London in 2 weeks, I guess, I'll be in London, and I would love to hang out. DM me on Twitter. I'm gonna find a location and then invite people to hang out in person. And then I'm going to Athens for a little workation, which is also going to be fabulous. Hopefully, cool. If not the air, all plane travel might close, but I'm just going with the flow. We're just not
deal with it once it's happened.
Dealing with
when
it
happens,
super calm. Yeah. Deal with it when it happens. No, but it feels really weird to just like have plans to travel again. It's really it's energized me, and like cool. Or like made me happier, I guess, in some way. Yeah, but that's it.
Yeah. Cool, then. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add.
No.
So I guess talk to you next week and see you around the interwebs.
Yes, and in London, folks.
And in London.
Bye.
Bye.